All right, now joining us now is former NBA standout LaPhonso Ellis and actor, writer, and now the president of 10 Talent Productions, Peter Parros. And guys, that was awesome. We were watching it yesterday, and first of all, we were dancing. Okay, because the music was happening. It was really good. But what a fantastic story there. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about kind of how you got to this point, because both of you guys, Christian men, and both in very different industries, but sports here, the NBAU, off in California and in the entertainment industry. And I know both of those industries can be very challenging to your faith. So what was it like for both of you?
Well, I think for me, part of what motivated me was being a Christian actor and just a limited amount of roles in terms of characters that I felt comfortable playing. Mm-hmm. So my progression was basically from actor to writer. I've written a couple films, co-wrote Something to Sing About for
That was very good, by the way.
Thank you. And several different Christian projects, and then wanted to get into the production side, because as an actor, you're subject to what other people are writing. As a writer, you're subject to who's going to produce your content or the kind of shows, and complaining about what's available. Right. As an African American, what's available for me and my kids. So the next step was producer. And Fonz was a great Christian brother here who we've known each other, we were saying, about 8 years. I've had the vision for about 11, 12 years, and just how to get going with production, get funding was a big struggle, and Fonz stepped in as a partner, saw the vision, and that kind of got us off into the production side.
Now, how did you go from NBA, also, and I know you work a lot with youth, big role model for youth, but how did you make that transition to partnering with in this project?
Yeah, Peter shared the vision with me about 7.5 years ago, and it had always been my dream to allow all the resources that the Lord's blessed my wife and me with an opportunity to leverage those things for the kingdom of God. And so when Pete shared the vision with me, we were already working with inner city ministry back then. It just seemed to be such a great fit. Mm-hmm. And for me, who's a volume consumer of kids' Christian videos, when he showed me the concept, I said, wow, there's nothing out there like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, having biracial kids with the opportunity to be able to go see something that can encourage them along in their faith and hopefully challenge them to a deeper walk with Christ. Jennifer and I were like, we're in, and so we jumped in.
Well, the great thing about it too, and watching the video, is it's old school. I mean, this is more like the Saturday morning cartoons that you and I grew up with. This isn't like the stuff that's on now that
I know, it's
sorry,
awful.
I'm old, I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's scary, because a lot of it doesn't seem like it's geared for kids. It's geared more for adults watching animation. And that's something, too, that we wanted to get back to and have clear Christian values, biblical stories, put it in a multicultural context. So you've got, the premise of Kids of the King is angels disguised as teenage superheroes. And they go from, truth is African American, mercy is Asian, faith is Hispanic. You've got zeal, who's from America, temperance, British, joy. I mean, they're all over. So it really gives an opportunity to reflect, especially not only in America, but just a global kind of culture, and something that kids can relate to, because that was something for me growing up, is like, where do I see myself in these stories? Right. And as a parent, I want something that relates to not only a biblical context, but present issues that kids are dealing with in a wholesome way.
Right. So do you think that is important? Because, I know a lot of times people will say, well, it doesn't matter. We're all Christians, and it doesn't matter if one is African American and one is Asian, and that's, we should all just be one. But do you find that it is important that kids do have that visual image of, listen, this kid looks just like you, and they can live for God too?
Right.
I think my experience has been, and it's interesting because as we talk about a number of ministries that are actually out there, the search has been for something that is culturally relevant out there. And I've actually tested it with a number of kids, and it's been interesting to see because of the multicultural nature of our angels, it's been interesting to see which of the superheroes the different kids identify with. And it's been almost I'd say probably 95% of the time, whether it's a Hispanic kid or an African-American kid or a white kid, they always identify with the angel that fits their culture. And so it's been really interesting, and I think that's what makes our product a lot more culturally relevant than what's out there now.
Well, not only trying to reach kids with the race that they are, but you mentioned that the issues that kids face. And I think for kids today, it's tougher growing up than it was even for us. And I know it wasn't easy in East St. Louis, okay, but they've got to face so many more challenges, and there's more things pulling them out there.
And that's something, even like, say, with this episode, early on what comes up is the issue of creation and evolution.
Right, yeah.
And whether we were designed with a purpose from God, or whether it just sort of randomly happened and we're just here. And that impacts the kinds of choices that you make, or why you live, does it matter whether there's a God or not a God, and how do you live out of that? And those are issues that creation versus evolution wasn't a big thing then, whether you call it intelligent design or what's happening now with cloning and all these different kind of issues weren't really issues for us. It wasn't an issue for me as a kid growing up, so I don't know. So
yeah, it was more science fiction back then.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have conversations with kids that often we don't have. My brother-in-law is in ministry, and he talks about how he talks to a lot of kids in school. It's I'm trying to remember the name of his ministry, but basically it's like, how come Bible stories are always these stories about old white guys in robes?
Right.
That's what he would always hear. So I think it is, how does this apply to my life now? And also on a spiritual level, for me growing up as a kid, I would always see angels as white people. Mm-hmm. And people would say, oh, you're a Christian, oh, that's the white man's religion. So there was something to me about bringing it in and saying, no, God is the God of the universe. Right. And it's not like something happens where spiritual things don't relate to who I am as a person, or doesn't relate to any culture. God is universal. God is the creator of all men were created in the image of God. So what does that mean in terms of our spirit, and helping to kind of give some kind of visual association to that for kids as they come up?
I agree, and at the top of the show, we kind of touched upon that when we were saying that, you know, based upon your experiences, how you grew up, that kind of changes your perspective and colors your perspective on how you see the world. So, so with that said, you know, you created many of these multicultural characters, and you said you really wanted to touch upon the urban Christian experience. What in your experience is the urban Christian experience, and how do you reach them?
Can I say one thing before we answer that? Reggie and Dion Byers are the creators of the comic book Kids of the King. So it's not something that we created. It's something that we had the opportunity to license. And it's a great product that's been out from Urban Ministries. There's a series of comic books out. But we have the opportunity to sort of bring it to life. Another level through animation. But the urban Christian experience.
But urbandom is changing. I mean, urbandom has been seen primarily as Hispanic and African American, and that is certainly not the case anymore, which makes what we have even more relevant for our Christian society. And the issues that they once were dealing with in the inner city, everyone thinks of drugs right away. Well, I happen to live out in the suburbs for the last 2 places that we've lived in, and the same drug issues that they were dealing with in the city, now they're dealing with in the suburbs as well. And so here, yet again, we have an opportunity to transcend a lot of those more perspectives that people have about what goes on in the inner city, because the same issues that they're having in the inner city, they're having everywhere else as well.